Hi, a warm welcome to everyone to the Digital Transformation Medtech session. I'm Terry Bressenham, your moderator for today, and with me are four of industry's leading thinkers on the opportunities and challenges of digital transformations for improving internal processes and engaging more effectively with healthcare professionals and patients. The format for today is about 30 minutes of us discussing the trends, ideas, and experiences, followed by your online Q&A for the remaining 10 minutes. So let me start by introducing today's panelists. Leila Gurney is Chief Quality and Regulatory Officer at GE Healthcare. In this role, Leila leads the global quality, regulatory, medical, clinical, and research teams and partners with leaders across businesses and geographies to ensure quality and reliability of GE products throughout the product lifecycle. Additionally, she directs strategy on regulatory affairs and policy, as well as clinical and medical matters, ensuring regulatory requirements are met and products are introduced to markets around the world efficiently and effectively. Leila joined GE in 2008 as Director of Regulatory Affairs in Canada, and prior to GE, she spent 10 years at PreMD, an IVD company, where she was responsible for quality, regulatory, and clinical research, and played a key role in partnerships with McNeil Consumer Healthcare and AstraZeneca. Prior to that, she was the National Director at Cardinal Health Canada. Since 2015, Leila has served on the board of directors of RAPS and represented industry on the Quality Systems Group of the Global Harmonization Task Force. Leila has a bachelor's and master's degree in biochemistry from McGill University. Next, I'd like to introduce Manish Bharara, Director of Clinical Research for Nevro. In this role, Manish leads the global clinical research initiatives at Nevro, furthering clinical evidence generation, directing clinical strategies, ensuring regulatory needs are met, and supporting market access initiatives. Prior to joining Nevro in 2020, Manish served 5 years as Senior Manager of Global Clinical Affairs at Siemens Healthineers. At Siemens, Manish oversaw clinical affairs initiatives for regulatory, quality, and product management to support product commercialization across businesses. Manish's experience in medical device development and operational and strategic leadership spans across academic centers of excellence, startups, and large med techs. Manish is also an accomplished author with over 50 peer-reviewed scientific publications. He has an MBA from the University of Arizona, earned his PhD in biomedical engineering from Bournemouth University in England, and his master's in medical physics and biomedical engineering from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Next, please welcome Aaron Rapidolini, who is Senior Director, Customer Experience and Strategy at Medtronic. Aaron leads the strategy, marketing, program design, training, and education for Medtronic Care Management Solutions. She joined Medtronic in 1998, starting in their European headquarters as a financial analyst, and then the Italian sales office leading product launches. After returning to the US, Aaron's work has been focused on the cardiac rhythm and heart failure division. She's had roles of increasing responsibility, including business management, product development director, director of clinical research, director of market expansion and clinical strategy, and senior director marketing for connected care. To complete the panel, I'm pleased to introduce Marut Setia. Marut is Senior Vice President, Global Growth Markets, and Global Head of the Medical Devices at Indegene. He is responsible for Indegene's strategy for emerging markets and partnering with medtech companies to advance their enterprise's digital capabilities. Prior to Indegene, Marut spent 13 years at GE Healthcare, gaining multiple experiences, and also was part of the executive leadership team as Chief Marketing Officer for South Asia and the P&L leader for GE's Education Solutions business across South Asia and Africa. His main areas of expertise include P&L leadership, business transformation, incubating new businesses, revenue marketing, and finance management, all with an eye to improve customers' experience and patients' outcomes. So thank you all for joining us today. Our goal for this panel is to examine some of the ideas and real-world experiences on 3 key areas. 1, how digital enterprise solutions and data insights can improve internal collaboration and processes like market access, regulatory clearance, and compliance. We'll also look at how engagement with your sales channels, healthcare professionals, and patients can be enhanced with effective digital channels. And lastly, we'll explore how to think about organizational needs and the associated key result areas to realize the promise of digital transformations with customers and colleagues alike. Lastly, this panel will try to be as candid as possible about some of the challenges they've faced in realizing digital and data-driven transformations. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into this. To the panelists, each of you are leading significant components of your company. So if I could ask each of you to reflect on how your strategies have evolved, to tap the sources of data, to look at the data insights that have improved your internal processes and perhaps your external engagements with healthcare professionals. So with that, Manish, if we could ask you to lead us off on this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Terry. Let me answer this with respect to clinical research and R&D, two distinct areas in medtech that have had significant impact from data and analytic capabilities. The common thread amongst these two areas is the use of data streams to support new product introductions, global regulatory approvals, and market access initiatives. Data here refers to the currency to create value for our users, and various sources of these data include patient-reported outcomes, vendor health data from therapy optimization, market surveys, clinical research data from wearables, etc. Let's jump in on two major strategic observations from my end. One major shift has been the long-term horizon, continuous systems thinking, and organizations buying into the real impact of digital transformation. Collectively, these data sources have enabled an overlay of clinical lifecycle over product lifecycle, thereby making it a continuous play for sustainability, wherein clinical data informs R&D and new market insights inform clinical pain points. This is no longer a snapshot in time for a very specific purpose. Rather, the new strategic expectation is for both data and related infrastructure to support progressive integration of data to inform product portfolio strategy. Secondly, let's focus on the new age business levers to own the life cycle of a disease condition that a company's innovation treats. There's a growing emphasis on co-creation, partnerships, and joint ventures to allow more comprehensive solutions addressing the life cycle of the disease. This process often starts with available diagnostic, therapeutic, and digital health solutions overlaid over the various clinical targets of a multi-system disease, example, cardiovascular disease or diabetes. Here on, the focus is to make incremental choices that address economies of scale, patient centricity, and business model innovation, all enabled by available data and analytics. Let me leave us with some key questions and challenges ahead. There's three major challenges I've faced through this journey of digital transformation. What are the meaningful KPIs that drive referral pathways and product adoption? Are we ready for a digital as a service model and new business models? This remains to be seen. The arranged marriages between consumer tech and medtech are trending, with examples like Apple and Zimmer, Apple and Johnson & Johnson. But what does it take to make this a mainstream play for majority of traditional medtech? And lastly, how can we expedite the standardization and translation of intelligent data collected from wearables and smart devices? Is there a role for co-creation in this space between regulatory authorities, pharma, med devices, and biotech?
Excellent, and some really important points that I think you made, and I'm sure we'll hear some of the connections now between that. Erin, how about yourself?
Yeah, so coming from Medtronic and sort of med device implantable in particular, and spent many years in the cardiac space within Medtronic. I would say one thing, and this evolution has started some years ago, but the use of this data coming from devices has been very much focused in the past on the performance of the device itself, or improving the algorithm in the device itself. I think what I've seen and been a part of is taking that and really putting it into the context of the world that the patient lives in, the world that the clinician is living in, and how to use that data in predicting the next thing, the next event, using the patterns to combine with other contextual data to move beyond just the monitoring of the device itself. So one example in our diagnostics business actually is there's a loop recorder. It's an implantable monitor, monitors beat by beat by beat. the original purpose of that device is to find an event, a syncopal event or something that happens. And if you look at that and what we have found, there's clearly a lot more data that can be used. I think to your point as well, Manish, the more you look, the more you find. So what do you do with that data? And how do you interpret that in context of everything else that's going on with the patient is really where we're headed. And moving from even that little device being a diagnostic tool to really a management tool is one of the ways I see, our business evolving and using data and insights to improve. I would say the last thing, or another way, the last comment I'll make on this question is the impact of business models and really moving towards using the data that we have to baseline a performance and then partner with customers on being also, selling on performance, the way they're being measured. So partnering with customers in a new way and new business models as they're being, and providers in particular, I'm speaking of, being put into risk-based models, they're being paid for performance. How do we partner as their vendors and their technology partners in a new way?
Yeah, well, I really like your thought around the device data and taking that information into the patient context or into the customer's business model context. That's really an important point. Leila, how about yourself? How you would reflect on this question of, what's changed?
Yeah, actually, a lot of what I would say has already been said, but maybe I'll just build on that. We are getting increasingly into this digital world. I agree with Erin, evolution, maybe revolution, I don't know. It's AI, machine learning driven. Data is really important, but the quality of the data is super important. The quality, the sufficiency, relevance to make sure that it's representative of the scope are important factors in developing it and in showing that it does what it's supposed to do for substantiating, claims that would get us regulatory clearance or approval. You also need independent data sets for development and testing. And so to this end, very much like what Manish said, right, we work with key partners, conduct external evaluations, clinical studies, et cetera, to gather good quality data. And there are also entities out there that are developing data repositories. For example, in Europe, the European Commission is working on the creation of a European data space over the next coming years. And this will allow, that actually will include the data in the healthcare sector, which will be compliant to privacy regulations, GDPR, et cetera, with governance rules. But we're seeing this kind of environment develop. Maybe an example different from Erin that I could give is, we see a lot of need also in healthcare institutions for using large amounts of data that they have to help them operate more efficiently. And so, forecasting staffing needs, especially in a COVID era, predicting no-shows, ensuring maximum use of slots. And so we work with these institutions to leverage their data to identify and analyze patterns and then develop tools that would optimize patient scheduling, provide insights into future schedules, staffing needs, et cetera.
Yeah, in fact, I think in many ways, the whole scenario of data for operational improvement and workflow coordination and asset management, et cetera, in a healthcare system might in fact be the more low-hanging fruit from a business model for both customers as well as companies. But you raised a really good point about, how to think about data and the quality of data, because I think any of the early AI companies realized after some bit of time that their models weren't as robust as they thought they were, and largely because the quality of the data or the sufficiency of diverse data was not there to make it generalizable. So it's a great point. Marut, what about you? How did you think about this idea that, the data and analytics or insights from data has changed the either internal processes or the external engagements?
So Terry, it's really difficult to not repeat some of my colleagues on the panel here, but let me give you two examples on how Indegene has harnessed the power of this data. One, let me talk on the commercial side, right? Especially in US, we have been able to create a lot of IP using interaction data with HCPs, right? So today, the engine that Indegene has developed can actually tell you which doctor likes what kind of content, likes to see what formats, and at what time in the day. So it has become increasingly important for us to get all this information so that in a world where reps cannot visit the doctors, how do we get that information to the HCPs so that we have maximum impact for our customer organization, right? And this is both on the pharma side and on the med device side. So I think that's one piece that got really, really accelerated in the COVID time, if you will, last 1.5 years. And to the point that we were discussing earlier, I don't see this going back to the near normal that we used to see a couple of years ago. So that's one piece we invested a lot of time and effort in building that IP and accelerating that IP. So that's one. On the regulatory and clinical side, I think Manish and Leila spoke a lot about this. So again, I'll give you a real world example. One of the things that most of the organizations deal with is pharmacovigilance, and even some of the medical devices are now being covered under FDA rules for PV. So one of the largest pharma companies, when they came out with their COVID vaccine, they were struggling at how do we process so many cases? You're gonna distribute 1 billion of these, and there are bound to be cases because these are all semi-approved drugs, if you will, semi-tested drugs, if you will. So how do we do that? And to solve that customer problem, Indegene built an AI-based model that takes away 60% of the time for reporting, 60% effort and time for reporting, PV reporting. And those are the places where we invested in creating AI-based digital models, which take in data from multiple sources, synthesizes them, and then gets the output out in a much simpler, faster, and cheaper format. So I think those are some of the examples where Indegene kind of played a large role over the last couple of years.
Yeah. And it feels like in some ways we're only just scratching the surface, right, about where this all will be able to take, as you said, internal things as well as the interactions with our customer base or patient base.
Absolutely.
Aaron, on the back of this, kind of big framework of all these things that are possible, I want to ask you in a more maybe pragmatic sense of what's your experience in how important the organizational structures are to be able to achieve these big data strategies or digital transformations?
Yeah. Now, this is a good question, and I think one that is definitely imperfect in its both answer and practice so far. I would say, what we've thought about and what I've thought about for our own organization is that before going to the org structure, the better customer experience starts with understanding the customer and empathizing and having an organization, having skills and experience and people in the organization that have sort of walked in their shoes, and be really purposeful about who you put in decision-making roles if you want to focus on the customer experience and really understanding and empathizing. So before going to structure, also think about people and experience and the problems you're trying to solve for that customer, because there just isn't a perfect organizational structure. You're going to solve for one thing and maybe something else emerges that isn't optimized. But that said, I would say that in a recent example, again, if I think of examples and stories bring it to life, if I think about it, my own experience right now in the organization that I work in at Medtronic, it's a monitoring business, and there are silos, there are groups in our organization that need to work together, but also need to focus on their function. And one thing we found recently was, in particular, the field-based organization who's with the customers every single day, were really trying to help solve those problems, solve issues or problems, things that came up. But kind of pushing that back internal, didn't have all of the insight of how to work things through the system, quote unquote. And we're really kind of finding a lot of friction. So this was frustrating for customers, it's frustrating for the sales reps and field-based people themselves. And so we took a look at that and said, how can you reorganize the work and put the work again back into the sort of the best prepared and best empathetic place in the organization to drive the issues. And created very recently an organization that is called the Customer Success Team. They're internally based, and they take whatever is coming at them from from the field. This is mostly issue resolution as an example here, but things that can cause your huge pain points from a customer experience standpoint and your brand and how you show up in the market. So this customer experience team, sort of takes the ball and knows how to navigate internally So that's invisible to the customer. They don't feel the friction, they don't need to, and sort of problems get solved. And the sales team honestly can focus on what their role is with customers. So it's a practical, maybe small example of changing and evolving an organization to take on new roles, and to take on and make it easy, just make it work for the customer, just make it work, and take those things internal, so that it's not something that the customer is either frustrated with or feels the friction. And then you can oil those things through organizational structure in part, and process is the other way to really get at it. So yeah, it's I think it's one of the things that needs to continue to evolve as well. It's not one organizational structure that you put in place so you can cookie cut and put it somewhere else. You need to learn and decide what you're going to optimize so that things don't fall through the cracks.
But I like your idea, which is start with do you really understand what problem you're solving? And have you put that in the context of your customers' understanding or perceived value of that, and then follow that thread all the way through your internal as is, and then the to be kind of ways you want to go about that. So
yeah, I would say one of the best practice that we started is to really start with the customer journey, understand your customer journey, and do your customer journey mapping so that you can understand the moments that matter the most. And prioritize those and make sure that your connective tissue in your organization is connected. Because again, naturally we're going to have functions and silos and sets of responsibility, but really understand your customer workflow, understand the customer journey, and focus on the moments that matter. That would be another sort of best practice I would recommend.
That's great, thank you. Leila, I wanted to ask you, as a kind of a central architect in this redesigning process to be more data-driven and more digitally enabled, can you speak to how important this has been to either the agility of the organization or the benefits and kind of speed to market in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, a few things with that from an agility perspective, right? I mean, it's a, like I said, it's increasingly fast environment. We're moving away from just, software as a standalone software medical device, but really AI enabled machine learning. And with this, because of the speed of innovation is greatly increased, right? So if you think about agility, software as a medical device is regulated. And today what happens is you develop your product, your medical device, you stop, you submit, it gets reviewed, it gets cleared, and then you go to market. And when you're getting into this fast-paced environment, you kind of need a regulatory environment or a regulatory paradigm that can stay up to speed with that. And you have to balance the whole, making sure that the products that are getting out there are high quality, they're safe, they're effective, there's controls in place, there's the regulatory oversight, with a balance of speed to market. And how do you develop a regulatory paradigm that actually helps with that? And today there's been a number of clearances, product clearances for AI machine learning based software, but these algorithms are locked. So you're still in this environment where you launch an algorithm, and then if you make changes to it, you can go and refile, like I just said. But we're going to get into this future state where algorithms won't be locked anymore. And, the next phase of innovation is going to be algorithms that learn and adapt over time. And the regulatory systems today aren't really set up to handle that. So from an agility perspective, regulators around the world have actually recognized this as something needs to be done here. How do we adjust so we achieve that balance? In 2017, FDA launched a pilot program called PreCert to evaluate an entirely new regulatory framework for software as a medical device, aimed really at developing a streamlined and efficient process. And the concepts for the pilot are innovative, but really would require additional statutory authority to implement. And while they're continuing with that effort, that'll be a long time. We know what it takes, right, to go through statutory authority and Congress. So really in the meantime, we need to look at bite-sized and incremental ways of getting there. Some of the things or ideas that are being looked at are, for example, algorithm change protocols. How can a manufacturer in a current submission provide information about anticipated future modifications that will be made in a controlled manner under the quality management system to produce a safe and effective outcome. And then that gets reviewed so that additional submissions for these changes won't have to happen in the future. And I know FDA is working on a draft guidance, other regulators are looking at this too. So that kind of agility is needed. But on top of that agility, you need regulators to work together so that you don't have so many different schemes. You know, there is this group called the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, or IMDRF. A number of regulators are involved in that, and making sure that they work together to converge so that the requirements for a manufacturer that's going out globally, you can only be as fast as the requirements that are out there to be able to launch. And then internal agility, right? To fully understand the requirements around the globe from a regulatory perspective, dependencies of markets on one another. Some markets, for example, require country of origin approval before you can go to them. Include all of those in the design inputs so you don't have to finish your product and then go, oops, got to go back and now rework it for this other market. So really understanding these, working with the design teams to make sure they're incorporated, and then having regulatory strategies that are optimized, right? That take into account all of the sequencing so that you can go to market as fast as possible. So I think agility is really important.
Those are great points. And particularly, I think, as you said, it is an evolving landscape. So staying agile and light on your feet is probably, really important thing to consider, and how rigid, if you will, the internal processes are. I also like the idea that you raised around the harmonization or the regulatory schemes around this. I think, as we were talking earlier about the data standardization out of devices, especially wearable type devices. How do you look at that as another form of just making it simpler or easier for people to follow suit and get things to happen for benefits of patient care? I mean, at the end, these things, yes, they do affect our business model, but they're also important in terms of advancing care for patients and getting 100%. Them the access to the latest developments. Yeah. Marut, you've spent time now in both the med device world as well as the pharma world, and obviously both of these sectors are related by a common customer, but often they operate in two very separate business models with little interaction with each other. Now leading Indegene strategy in the med device market, can you give us some comparative analysis of how pharma uses data or digital platforms, and perhaps how you think Medtech could learn some of the advantageous approaches that pharma has been using?
And Ted, you said it, I mean, even though the customer group is the same, the approach that the two industries have taken to address that customer is cannot be more different, right? I mean, out of the bat, the first thing that I realized, having spent like a long time in the device side and coming to pharma, is that in med device, we as an industry, we try to do everything on our own, right? So we are very resource intensive, right? So everything from marketing to regulatory to quality, you would see that we'll have every large company will have their own CEOs. They will have their own people to kind of run that. Pharma, on the other hand, has taken a completely different approach, and they've said, you know what, we will focus on what we do best, and we'll try to leverage expertise across the segments and see what best we can get and see if we can leverage that. I'll give you a personal example on. So when I first took over as Chief Marketing Officer, I realized that my team's cost was 1.5x my marketing budget. And I knew something was off because this didn't make sense to me. And
hard to make that math work.
Yeah, it was difficult, right? And obviously at that point I had no idea on how pharma kind of worked this. I was like, you know what? Let's take a goal. Let me set a goal for myself that I want to have my team cost to be 0.8x of my marketing budget. So I had a long discussion with the CFO and said, let me try and repurpose this here, right? And we did, and it did move the needle, if you will. And then I flipped to the other side and I realized that in the pharma side, the benchmarks are like 0.2x or 0.3x, right? And a lot of work gets done by experts who sit outside the organization versus those who sit inside the organization, right? So that was the first fundamental difference that I had to grapple with, which was very, very interesting. And now when I speak to my colleagues at G Healthcare and other organizations, I'm like, you know what, you guys really need to just take a look at this, right? Go to a pharma company, whichever you want, I'll arrange a visit, but go see how they do it. Maybe you'll realize some benefit. And of course, there are reasons why we do the way we do it, but it could be some interesting learning. Another in marketing, we used to use this buzzword, omnichannel marketing. And I swear to God, I had no idea on how that really worked until I actually saw these things in action. And like I was saying earlier, pharma has kind of taken the way they reach out to an HCP to a whole different level. Right? The next best action plan. So if I send an email to an HCP and he or she clicks on it, what would be my next action once that has happened? If he or she doesn't click, what is the action? If they look at 2 emails consecutively in 2 weeks, what's my third action? And it just, when I initially kind of saw this, it kind of just blew my mind. Like, there is so much that you can learn from this cross industry experience. So those are some of the examples, and I can give you multiple examples in the regulatory side, and especially, and Leila, you were just talking about how it is difficult to understand the regulations of different countries, and so you have to make sure your design is focused on how do you address it. And I realized that companies like Indegene have already developed platforms where regulations for 100 countries is already kind of fed in. So if I'm designing a product, I want to launch it, let's say in Singapore, the platform will tell me, listen, if you're launching in Singapore, you should launch the same product in Indonesia and Thailand at the same time because they follow the same statutory requirements. Right? So things have been made more efficient on the pharma side of the world. On the flip side, I still feel that medical devices are an extremely personalized industry. The way med device industry knows their KOLs, the way med device industry knows the problems of how medical devices solving the problems in the hospital, that is unparalleled. So I think that is one thing that the pharma industry need to maybe spend a little bit more time on and come up to speed. So I think those are some of the dichotomies, if you will, but there's a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah. I think that might be the key takeaway is just more cross-pollination, especially I think as some of the precision medicine or molecular-based diagnostics become much more of a codependency on the choice of therapies. I think this is another place that clearly there'll be much more needs for intersections. Manish, just changing gears a little bit, I think, you and I were talking about the pandemic has laid bare this disparity in patient care. And how do you think about data analytics or digital platforms in terms of, shrinking that equity gap? And maybe an analog or a corollary, if you will, to that is how should a company look at that gap closing as a business opportunity?
Absolutely. Let me start off by saying that customer communication and patient engagement are integral to marketplace for medical device business in general. And undoubtedly, COVID has disrupted the way we condition to conduct ourselves, but thankfully, it's not all negative. Let me bring our focus back again on clinical and R&D and share a couple examples from the last 18 months or so. While digital transformation was already a strategic mandate, COVID has catalyzed more focused customer interactions, remote conduct of clinical studies, leveraging telehealth capabilities to conduct clinical studies as designed, with added flexibility approved from IRBs and ethical committees. All this enabled by the shared vision among sponsors, patients, research staff, and investigators. So that's the key victory here. This message and this approach has sort of resonated outside of our internal stakeholders as well. Second, pushing through the roadblocks brought by COVID, we've all acquainted ourselves, our resilient self, and focused on our core purpose to bring safe, effective, and efficient solutions to address customer needs. We spoke earlier about customer journey mapping, patient journey mapping. Those are those are integral to our approach to bring safe and effective medical devices. Specifically, we experienced a deliberate and continuous customer interactions focused on learning about their pain points and core needs. In our case, we determined the core needs for our business is providing pain relief for patients using spinal cord stimulation. We were able to leverage already established digital infrastructure, grit, and creativity to enhance our digital product offerings through this phase that provide remote programming options for our patients to continue their pain relief without the need for them to come and visit the clinic. This also resulted in a 7-fold increase in number of programming options, and all this again determined algorithmically by over 80,000 cases that we collected over the course of time in our digital cloud. And one last point I want to bring in that sort of underpins everything that we've talked about is the organization's access to talent pool and technology clusters. We spoke earlier about our org structures, and it sort of ties in very well together that as we think about digital play and digital transformation, we have to think long-term about our access to talent pool and technology clusters as well. And this may be specific to different medtech categories, but is a significant determinant of execution quality and agility for digital transformation.
Great. I think those are really important. I know too, you had mentioned before about even just the way in which you communicate now, and you think that is going to sustain itself, or part of that will sustain post the, allowing everyone to get together again. Do you think your virtual digital interactions would play a greater role than they did pre-COVID, let's say?
Absolutely. Let me share a recent metric published in New England Journal of Medicine. In the United States, the number of telemedicine visits increased by a factor of 38, and the number of messages sent on patient portals increased by more than 40% in the spring of 2020 as compared to pre-pandemic levels. I think this is a great indicator that things are changing, and they're here to stay. And to your point earlier, I personally believe that these transformations are going to stay, specifically the place for telemedicine and how it can bridge the equity gap amongst various socioeconomic classes, geographical jurisdictions, etc. There's definitely more to be done on the payer side and understanding how do we make it pay, because right now those are big hurdles on the reimbursement and payers side, but I think over time we have to collectively address that as a community.
Yeah. And Leila, when you've spent a lot of time in front of the FDA discussing the regulatory framework around digital and AI products, when you think about that and maybe some of your advice of how to successfully navigate the regulatory process, in conjunction with the digital tools that you've used to help accelerate or improve upon the collaboration internally, give us some thoughts about what's your advice, and are there things that you feel, digital tools that you feel are helpful in making sure that you're, as ready as can be when you get in front of the regulatory process?
Yeah, maybe just kind of building off of what I said before, right? The importance of quality of data, the relevance of the data, the scope, the relevance to the scope, independence of data sets, the sufficiency of the data, all of that. I mean, that's really important in developing algorithms that can then have regulatory success. The other thing is, their FDA and some other regulators as well have processes in place where you can actually meet and ahead of time. FDA's QSub process, for example, where you meet with the reviewers and you actually talk through kind of the process for what you need in your regulatory submission, the regulatory clearance, et cetera. So in cases where it's innovative, it's breakthrough, you need more interactive feedback, then my advice would be to use those routes. regulators are open to that. FDA is super open to that, to have those discussions so that, you don't submit something that you would then get stuck in. So I definitely recommend doing that. And with regard to the regulatory schemes, kind of building off of what I said before, there is an appetite and a need, right, to kind of evolve in this area. I mean, if you even think about the definition of standalone software as a medical device actually changed a few years ago with the 21st Century Cures Act that basically clarified some of the functionalities that were excluded from being a medical device. So there is absolute evolution in this area, and I know there will also FDA and other regulators, as I said, are thinking through creative ways to kind of adjust to the times and make sure that we can balance the oversight with speed.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we're going to switch over to some of the questions that are coming in, and maybe the first one to you, Marut, as someone the question's coming from someone who's a head of a regulatory group, and how to digitize their process. What are some of the best tools available for medical device manufacturers to digitize their regulatory processes?
Yeah, actually, there is a lot of work that has been done in this space. In my head, when you look at the problems that this industry is facing, there are a couple of things that kind of jump out. One is extraordinary time that is taken to search the literature. And there are organizations, including Indegene, who have come up with tools which can make this much faster, easier, and the effort that takes days today can be shrunk into hours, right? So those are some of the things that are being used, especially in the pharma side, which can be repurposed to devices. Other space I see is where authoring of CERs, PSURs, PMCF reports. Again, this takes a long time in an organization. And there are tools that are now available which help you co-author things, which help you pre-populate a large part of those reports without having to kind of do it every time manually. So some of these things are really revolutionizing the way the industry does the work. And I feel that some of the challenges that are today faced by regulatory leaders can be addressed by automation and using some of the AI tools. So that's what I feel is probably the most important.
Another question that's posed to each of you on the panel is how to rate the medtech industry's mental readiness for digital transformation through the use of data and operationally use of data for both operations as well as commercial. And who do you think the leaders are in the space? So Manish, you want to kick us off? And
absolutely,
how mentally ready are we to make a big change? And who do you think, what are some examples, if you will, for people in the marketplace that you think have been leading in this area?
Absolutely. I think this is a difficult one to answer because this is so specific to each organization, and all the factors that we've touched upon in the last 30 minutes play into it, to play into the organization's readiness. I think as I see it today, we have definitely accepted the current play, and as I see in terms of where we are headed, I think Leila spoke about a partnership model with our regulators. That's the key for us to succeed in this space. And today, as I see it, what succeeded and what plays really well is the relevance and reliability of data coming out from clinical studies, coming out from post-market vigilance that Marut touched upon. And I think two other things that are really important here, that we talk about standardization a lot, but we have to put it in the right scientific context. We cannot standardize everything because there has to be a fit for purpose based on the clinical pain point we are trying to solve, the nature of the technology. And so that's why I think this is a tough one to answer in terms of sort of a general readiness. But I think as a community, I've seen all the right signals, even with COVID, pulling us down initially. I think in general, the market has done well to continue to provide new offerings in the marketplace. In fact, the veracity of these data coming out from clinical trials that have been ongoing, the new product innovations that have touched upon the market in the last 18 months is just amazing. So I think we're more than ready. But I think the key question is, and I'll leave it at that, is our healthcare and reimbursement infrastructure ready? I think that's where I see a lot of activity in the future.
Yeah, which is, I think, a little bit what Leila was also alluding to. But Leila, any examples of companies you think you've seen adopt a digital platform more effectively or doing something more novel?
There's been a number of, clearances in AI, machine learning. In this space, we've actually been pretty in the forefront as well with Edison platform at GE Healthcare. Honestly, I can't at the top of my head kind of give you names of all those companies, but yeah, I think as an industry, the headspace is there. I agree with what Manish said. We're ready, right? We are. Everybody has digital as probably as in their top 5 priorities, if not the first priority, right? And it's the environment that needs to kind of move along with it and get there. And I think it will. Healthcare as a sector is probably one of the last sectors to get there, but it's absolutely, I think, from a mental headspace perspective, we're all there.
Yeah.
And working
I think
on it.
I'm really interested in this federated learning model. I think that's something that a lot of academic centers are reluctant to let their data go off campus or off premise. And so I think, how do you build AI with that need for this academic information, but without it becoming a problem? So I think federated learning is a area that I find exciting. And then I think, secondly, the way in which AI in the future would be just thousands of algorithms running in the background, helping operationally our customer flow and patient care decisions, but also how do you use that to streamline your operations? So, well, we're right up close here to the time we were given. So I want to switch over to a last question for everyone. And a big thank you, obviously, to Indegene for hosting this, which we could probably speak for another hour about these things. But I'd like you to think about, based on your experience and perhaps the trial and errors side of that question, if you could advise your kind of pre-digital transformation self, what would you say now, based on what you learned? And maybe, Marut, you could start this one.
One thing I would say is that there'll always be naysayers, right? I mean, fortunately, COVID has reduced that, if you will. Now I think everybody is at least willing to do a pilot, if nothing else. But I would say that, do a pilot, learn from it, keep iterating, and don't get bogged down by people who don't believe in digital. Now, obviously, pre-COVID, it was much more and much lesser now. So that's one. Other one, probably, I would say that don't invest in short-term initiatives, especially digital. It doesn't give you value and ROI in months. It has to be a longer-term journey, a longer-term investment horizon. So work with the CFO better and make sure that you are talking about a much longer-term horizon on measuring ROI. Yeah, those two probably.
Great. Manish?
First of all, Terry, I'm so glad you didn't pick me the first one. I needed some time to think. So, yeah, I would say pause and take the time to learn what digital transformation really is in the context of your core business, as well as your functional area. And additionally, I would say prioritize business critical activities where digital transformation adds a competitive advantage, and be aware of the potential disrupting threats.
Very good advice. Leila?
All right, so I agree with everything that's said. I'll probably take a totally different angle, just maybe make it a little bit lighter. Look, a heads up and an advice, right? Heads up that it's going to be exponentially transformative and fast. and to jump right in and embrace it. I think that if you look at how we worked through COVID, it could not have been possible at all without the digital transformation. Even personally, I mean, thinking about, in the early days, ordering groceries online or Christmas shopping online. I mean, how would this be possible if AI didn't tell you what you would be interested in? It'd take forever to do all this stuff. So that's on the lighter side. And look, on the advice, also to kind of stop and take some time for yourself, because digital is great. It's everything at your fingertips. It's constant, and it's sometimes good to actually take some time and to slow down. So that's a different angle for you.
Very good on all fronts there. Listen, I think, thank you again for everyone for doing this. This is very helpful. We heard a lot of great ideas. It looks like we're just at the beginning. So thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.